Joining me now here on set with me, and former federal prosecutor and former Justice Department lawyer, along with Josh Gernstein, senior legal affairs writer for Politico. Both of you, thank you for being with us. And Josh, we'll start with you. What has stood out to you in everything that we've learned since the meeting between Blanche and Ghislaine Maxwell?
Well, I have to say, Ariel, that the things that we've heard just in the last 24 hours about a potential pardon really is what jumps out at me about these discussions that have been taking place over the last 48 hours, because they're just not the way a criminal investigation is normally conducted. And it's hard to see in this case how Ghislaine Maxwell, who was charged by the Justice Department with lying under oath, would ever be a good witness against anybody else. And if that's the case, then you really don't see sort of a path from here to prosecution of someone else in the Epstein matter. And therefore, you start to wonder, is this part of a deal to reduce her sentence, as that victim you just heard from discussed, in exchange for her perhaps accusing one of the president's political enemies of some involvement here, but that person then not actually being charged with anything.
Okay, so to that end, Brendan, how unusual is all of this, where you see the Assistant Attorney General heading down to meet with someone who's been convicted of very serious crimes? What do you make of all of that?
You know, there's precedent for interviewing people who have been convicted before, so that's not terribly unusual. What is unusual is exactly what you said, which is Todd Blanche, the #2 official at the Justice Department, conducting this interview.
And the president's former personal attorney.
You nailed it. You know, I have never heard of that happening. The Deputy Attorney General essentially runs the entire Department of Justice. They should not be involved in individual investigations. And what this says to me is twofold. One, it's a clear message to Maxwell and her attorney that they have a direct line to the president in these negotiations. And it also suggests that the president is really scared of what Maxwell might say and only wants to send somebody that he can trust.
And we keep hearing that she was offered limited immunity as it pertained to those discussions with the DOJ. So break down exactly what that means.
You know, the limited immunity is actually kind of the least corrupt of what seems to be an extremely corrupt process here. So, you know, people can be offered immunity in exchange for potential cooperation. But as Josh has just said, you know, this is a witness that the Department of Justice previously accused of perjury. This is a witness who has every incentive to lie in order to get advantage here. So there's nothing that she could say that could plausibly help in future criminal prosecutions other than corrupt ones.
All right. And Josh, did the Justice Department go into this interview knowing that they had something to give her? That was this a quid pro quo? Were they going to get information in exchange for possibly a pardon?
Well, I don't think there's any explicit promise, but they must have known that she would be interested in some type of pardon or commutation that would cut her sentence down. I mean, I guess the question at the end of the day is, you know, what would the political fallout for President Trump be for offering that kind of pardon? He's certainly shown in the past that he's willing to offer pardons to people who are his friends and associates, which we should mention. You know, President Trump is not a totally detached party here. He has a previous relationship with both Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. So, you know, I think that's really an open question. I doubt there's an explicit promise on the table at this point, but her lawyer has made quite clear that that's what she's in the market for. And so we have to assume that these discussions are designed to advance that, because as Brendan said, I think the notion of them advancing another criminal prosecution of some sort related to Epstein is very remote.
So a New York Times article called the DOJ's involvement here rife with potential pitfalls and complexities, that it may have an extension to the president in some way. Do you agree with that? Josh,
yeah, I do agree with that. And I also think it's interesting. It could be that Todd Blanche had to pursue these discussions himself because, you know, people in the Justice Department might have been very, very nervous about getting deeply involved in this matter, given the role that President Trump has already expressed here, given the difficulties that the Justice Department has had in other high-profile prosecutions where it has essentially thrown the line prosecutors over the side. And in fact, of the prosecutors who prosecuted Epstein, at least up to the point of his suicide, and then prosecuted Maxwell successfully, I think only one of the significant prosecutors on that case remains on the Justice Department's payroll. So they may have just decided the simplest thing to do here was to have Blanche handle this rather than get into a big kerfuffle with their own personnel.
I covered the Ghislaine Maxwell case. It was a long-running case. We heard a lot of evidence presented there. Maxwell's lawyer says that she was compliant, that she answered all the questions, she didn't take the fifth. So what could they possibly be getting out of her?
In an ordinary interview, you'd start by asking questions that you knew the answer to, right? To make sure that she's actually being honest. And then you transition to questions that you don't know the answers to see if she has interesting information that could be useful for a future prosecution. But I think the point that all of us are making right now is that Maxwell isn't a particularly credible witness, isn't going to be useful for a future prosecution, which makes you ask, well, what information would this president and this deputy attorney general want? Presumably, they'd love a bunch of names of political enemies that could be implicated, either legally or in the realm of public opinion.
But isn't it also possible they could hear President Trump's name come up there, too?
I think if Maxwell and her lawyer are smart, they will probably not be uttering his name.
Fair enough. Yamiche, politically speaking, joining me now, Michael Hardaway, former communications director for Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, and Brendan Buck, MSNBC political analyst and former press secretary for Paul Ryan and John Boehner. Gentlemen, thanks for being here on a Saturday in the summer. Michael, we'll start with you. What's your take on ads like this, especially targeting what appears to be MAGA voters?
Well, it's brilliant for one reason. Those MAGA voters are never going to vote Democratic, but that's not the point. The idea is to make them disaffected so that they understand that they were betrayed by this president. And when the midterm elections come, they stay home, which they might have done anyway since he's not at the top of the ticket. And as we know, many of those people are not actually Republicans. They're just guys who like Donald Trump. And so if we can help them understand that they have been lied to and betrayed by this president, they might just stay home, which is problematic for him, obviously, with Democrats taking the majority in the House and maybe the Senate. So that's the strategy there.
Brendan, Congressman Ro Khanna claims that the fight over the Epstein files can actually help Democrats take on Trump more effectively, saying it's just about trust in government and transparency. And then some strange bedfellows here. Republican Thomas Massie, who has allied himself with Ro Khanna now on this topic, is rallying some MAGA allies. So no matter how he tries to deflect here, is Trump just losing the narrative?
Yeah, and look, Ro Khanna may be able to put a sort of good face on it, but let's be clear, that and the ad that you just showed, this is just trolling, and I actually think it's good politics for Democrats. I don't fault them for it, but it's trolling. They understand that Republicans are eating themselves alive right now, and Democrats are there to help them out and do that. Ro Khanna is teaming up with a Republican to force a vote on this. I'm not sure that Ro Khanna cared too much about this for the 4 years when Joe Biden was president, but now that Republicans are fighting with each other, he's happy to bring this to the forefront. I get it. It's politics. It's probably going to work. It's still just a little, not necessarily dishonest, but you understand what his motives are.
I love the fact that you just put that so succinctly. They are trolling the Republicans on this one and trolling Donald Trump. That's as plain and simple as it gets. Michael, not all Democrats, though, are on board with this Epstein strategy. You had Axios reporting. Some say that they're just plain sick of talking about this, and they'd rather focus on things like Medicaid cuts and rising costs, the big, beautiful bill and what it could mean. What carries more weight with voters in your mind? Is it the Epstein thing, or is this obsession kind of running its course?
It's a fool's errand for any Democrat to think that you can only do one thing. Democrats can fight this war on two fronts. You can both make the president pay for the words that he used in terms of promising his voters that he would release these files. It's also interesting that he apparently is in those files. But on the other side, Democrats should make the president pay for this horrific economy we're in. You have rising prices. You have 17 million Americans about to lose health care. You've got 5 million Americans about to lose their food assistance, and the dollar is down 10%, which we've not seen in 50 years since we came off the gold standard. And so Democrats should have both of those conversations. The Epstein stuff doesn't get you a victory in the midterms, but it can help Republican voters understand they've been lied to. The economy message, the economic message, is what gets you the victory in the midterm elections.
Brendan, we're talking about like an arc of outrage from far left to far right here. Democrats are actually aligning themselves with MAGA conspiracy theorists on this issue. Could that actually be problematic for them? These are the very voices that Democrats for so many years were trying to discredit.
Well, I think at the end of the day, I think they hope to prove that Donald Trump was just lying to them on this, as Michael said. So I'm not too worried about this for them. But let's remember the context in which this is all happening. It was just a matter of weeks ago when Republicans passed and Donald Trump signed into law their biggest legislative accomplishment for this entire Congress. This is going to be all they have to show to voters. And instead of going out and talking about that and trying to sell it, which is, it was unpopular when they passed it, so they've got an uphill climb to begin with, they're talking about this instead. So these are lost, wasted weeks for Republicans who need to turn the message on that bill around, and they're not able to do that because they're, again, fighting with each other. So for Democrats, the longer they can keep this conversation going, the better off they are, and it's just a big loss for Republicans.
Okay, Michael, is there a danger in following MAGA down this rabbit hole, or is this, as you kind of have alluded to, this is a smart way to seize on the political headwinds, but is there a danger in this?
No, Democrats don't have to follow anyone down any hole. The reality is that this administration said that it had the information. Pam Bondi said, I have the list. Donald Trump said, I'm going to release the information. All Democrats have to do is do what they're doing with these ads, which is show people what they have said. We don't have to partner with anyone. We don't have to do anything outside of provide sunlight on what the administration has said about the Epstein stuff. I think anyone with basic common sense could say that something seems weird here. It doesn't take a conspiracy theorist to say that.
But at the root of all of this was brought up to the surface by conspiracy theorists that Democrats have tried to debunk for many years now. Wouldn't it be more prudent for them to focus on what they've said is a disastrous, big, beautiful bill?
Well, the problem is some of those conspiracy theorists are now actually in the U.S. government.
To be clear, the Republicans have been flailing, and they've created a scenario where no one's going to believe them. None. Because they've created a scenario where Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell's only reasonable move, in many ways, is to lie. Or at least that's the incentive they've created. Because here's the thing. Often somebody who's facing jail, was already in jail, and they want to get a pardon or leniency or time off their sentence, one of the things that they're incentivized to do is to flip on others. But usually you can't just say give a list of 10 names and then boom, instantly you get 10 years off your sentence. That's not how it works. The info you provide has to be accurate. It usually has to lead to an outcome. Like they actually have to get a conviction or a confession or a plea or something from your info. It's not just automatic. And so she could lie and say name people that weren't on the list to save her own behind. But there's pitfalls to that. But with this, she doesn't have to lie to blame anybody. She just hypothetically at least has to lie to protect people. And while that's still a crime, that's still perjury if she does it under oath, that doesn't have the same kind of negatory effects. So for example, if she is given, and this is all negotiated, under the table, very hush-hush, hypothetically, that it's like you come out and you testify that Donald Trump was never involved, that top Republicans were never involved. You're going to make one or two sacrificial lambs of people that we don't like. We're going to nail them with charges, and then we're going to reward you with a pardon for bringing people to justice. But really, it's all for you lying potentially to protect Trump. And this is all happening, guys, because Republicans lost control of the message. So I want you to be vigilant. This is probably going to happen. She is going to be weaponized to protect Republicans. And when it does, I don't want you to believe that BS narrative.